What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be working on the CB750. We have some issues with the bike. I haven't been able to ride this thing since last year. Towards the end of the season, I started having bogging issues mid-range. The chain, the drive chain, is so loose that it's literally sitting on the swing arm of the bike. So like when you try to take off, you hear it smack the swing arm. So I'm not riding with the chain like that. And we're leaking fuel out of carburetor number 4. So that's what we will be doing today. We'll be looking at carburetor number 4, trying to readjust the float needle in the carburetor. And if we have time, we're gonna be changing the chain and the sprockets. So for those of you who don't know what a cafe racer is, basically in the 1960s, this trend started happening where these riders would essentially just strip their bikes, chop everything and anything off that would make the bike heavier that they didn't absolutely need. Because as we all know, the cheapest way to make anything fast is to make it as light as possible. And from what I understand, there's a few different variations to the story. Apparently, they would race from cafe to cafe, or I also heard there was like a specific cafe. I think it was called Ace Cafe or something like that. I'm probably butchering the name, but it was something like that. And they would meet up there, and there was like this tunnel. They would like race through the tunnel. It was like a really popular meetup spot, and people started calling them cafe racers. So I thought it was really cool, but my obsession with these kinds of bikes really came from Tron. I think we all know that scene from Tron Legacy with the Ducati. I think it's like a Ducati 1000 Sports Classic or something like that. I'm not too sure. That scene where it's just weaving in a tunnel like that. I saw that and I was like, I need a motorcycle. Like it's done. Like a very common trend for cafe racers is that they're all single-seater bikes. So the rear end's gonna be chopped off, probably about, I'd say here. All this is gonna get chopped off. The battery's gonna be relocated. I already have the pod filters on the bike. And yes, the jets in the carbs have been changed to run with pod filters. And I already have a lot of the parts for the cafe racer. Like all these boxes here, except this one, is all cafe racer stuff. I have the LED strip. I have the battery box. This box here is my seat. And I think, yeah, this is my, let me get this up. This is my rear cowl. I gotta get this thing painted because it's rusting. So basically that's what it's gonna look like. And then the LED strip goes in here. That's gonna be the brake light. It's my Alcantara seat. And then you want to get lower handlebars. You don't necessarily have to. I've seen some like Scrambler Cafe Racer hybrids where they have the higher handlebars. They're honestly a lot more comfortable. We still have to get the clip-on handlebars. Basically, they're gonna clip on the forks here. So it's gonna be a much lower and a much more aggressive riding position. And then you can also get like, you can also change like the rear sets here, push them more towards the back. So you're a little more like MotoGP style. That's like finer details towards the end, but I think that getting the clip-on handlebars are more important. From what I understand, the idea is that you want to have like a straight line from the back of the bike all the way to the front. From the rear cowl, the frame of the bike, tank, the clip-on handlebars, and the headlight kind of all want to be flush. You can see like the top of the light is not aligned with the gas tank. So you want to drop the front end just a bit so that everything's flush. Like the highest point of the bike should be the gas tank here. So all this is way too high. It has to all drop down. It's really easy to mess up the look of a cafe racer. So I'm gonna try to do everything right. And for paint, it's gonna be black. Everything's gonna be black. In case you guys haven't realized, I really like the color black. So it's gonna be blacked out, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So basically the float needle in here is stuck open, and because of that, all the fuel is constantly pouring in. It's overfilling the carburetor. So that's what these lines are here for. These are the overflow lines. So we're gonna drain the fuel and then remove the carburetors. And then we're gonna open it up and see if we can just readjust the float needle. And hopefully that will solve the fuel leak issue. So hopefully that won't take too long, because the faster we get this done, the faster we can get to work on the chain, and the faster I can get back to riding. All we gotta do is disconnect the throttle cable and the choke cable. So if you look So if you look here, this one here is the choke. See, if I pull on this, you see the choke open. Now it's closed. The one in the back, see the throttle. I don't know if you can see that. The fact that the entire fuel delivery system is mechanical and there isn't a single electronic component to it is so cool. Alright, so now that we drained the fuel out of the carburetors, all we're gonna do now is heat up the intake boots on the carburetors. So it's just these things here, we're gonna heat them up. Alright, so apparently the heat gun's actually my brother's. He bought it, and now that I forgot, I thought I bought that thing. He bought it, it's his, and he took it back to his apartment. So yeah, I don't have a heat gun, so we're gonna go to the store, we're gonna pick up a heat gun, we're gonna come back, and we're gonna get back to it, okay? So the way these things work, basically the carburetor sits like this, right? And then you have this piece here. This is called the float bowl. This goes like this, like that, right? So that fills with fuel. And as the fuel rises, it'll push up against the float here like this. And as that gets pressed out by the fuel, there's a little needle inside the carburetor, and that cuts off the fuel supply, allowing the fuel in the float bowl to be used. And as that fuel level drops, the float goes back down, and then it opens up the needle, more fuel gets dumped into the carburetor. The issue right now is that the float is set way too high on this one here. So, wait, is it that one there? Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so yeah, it's this one here. So what's happening right now is that the needle's not doing its job. Too much fuel is being poured into the float bowl. And this is what this line is. This is the overflow line. And basically, once the fuel reaches this level here, where the needle is, it gets dumped into the line. So we're just gonna readjust the float height. This is made specifically for carburetors. It's decent. Basically, you just set this one here for the diameter of the carburetor, and then this one here is to measure the float height. The spec for the CB750 is 15.5 millimeters. You can't get 15.5 exactly on this. It doesn't work like that. It won't allow it. And even if you get it as close as you possibly can to it, what happens sometimes if you're not careful is that this, as you press the float against it, it'll shift. It's okay, you know, but personally I much prefer using a vernier caliper like this. And you get an exact reading with the digital gauge here, and it locks into place, so even if I press against it, it'll always stay at 15.5. So we're gonna be using this. So basically we have to shift the carburetor in a way that if you look at the float here, you see how the float, if you hold it like this, it hangs kind of low. You don't want that. So you have to shift the carburetor to a point where it sits kind of flush. So the float and the carburetor are flush, and that's where you do the measurement. Otherwise, if you try measuring it like this or completely upside down, you're not gonna get a proper reading. So make sure if you do this, you do it properly. I say that even though I've never done this before. But yeah, so we're just gonna get to it now. We're gonna measure the float height. Just by looking at it, I can kind of tell that this one, like the fourth carburetor, the one that's leaking fuel, is set way too high. It sticks out a lot more than the other three. The two on the left I think the two on the left are honestly okay. I'm pretty sure they're in spec, but the two right ones they're way off because they're completely different. Like if you look there, and then you look at that one, this one sits way lower than that one. Honestly, you can't even tell on camera, but when I'm looking at it, I can see that like the fourth one is a little too high. This here is the needle, and basically it goes into here. This is where the fuel comes from. So this is in here like that. But the way it's positioned, I measured it already. The float height was at 20 millimeters. It's supposed to be 15.5. So basically this is sitting too far out like that. This is a bit of an exaggeration. So that's why the fuel was constantly being poured in. So we're gonna readjust it so that way with the proper spec, it will sit more like that. And it's gonna stop the fuel from pouring into the float bowl. I measured the other floats. The first one was okay. The first one's like at 15.8. Second one I wrote down, it was at 17.5, so it's not great. And number 3 was at 18. So they're all kind of a bit out of sync, so I'm gonna readjust all of them except the first one. And hopefully the bike will just honestly just run a little bit better. I'm finished with the float height adjustment. I got everything into spec. They're all 15.5, except the last one, which I know, it's the most important one. It's the one that was leaking fuel. I know, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get it like to 15.5. It was like 15.43, 15.58. Like I couldn't get like 15.5, so it's at 15.49. That's the closest I could get to it. And honestly, compared to what it was like at 20, it was like the height was like 20 millimeters before. It's way better. It's gonna be enough to get the job done. All that's left to do now is just put the float bowls back onto each carburetor and then try to get it onto the engine and hopefully get this thing to turn over and start. Because then all that's left is the chain. Alright, so we got everything installed onto the bike. I didn't bother filming, put the tank on, all that stuff, just because I think this video is long enough as it is. All we gotta do now is try to start the bike and check to see if the fuel actually leaks. Alright, I gotta do this fast because it's starting to rain. We're gonna open up the fuel. It doesn't look like it's leaking. Okay. All right, this is the end of the video. I'm super happy with the result. We're not leaking any fuel. The bike sounds great. The throttle's super responsive. It hasn't been like that in a long time. I thought I had an electrical issue, but it turns out it was just the carburetors. I'm super happy. I want to go riding, but with the chain the way it is, I can't right now. So honestly, I'm just gonna get to work on it right now after I finish editing the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.